Hey everybody, welcome. This is panel 4, super exciting. I'm Jaden Braves. I'm the CEO of the Young Politicians of Canada. We're an organization to get young Canadians involved in democracy. This might be the most exciting panel of the day, which is Would You Run? I Did, and the youth perspectives on climate leadership. We have a great panel for you today. Super exciting. This session is delivered in partnership with my organization, the Young Politicians of Canada. We work to, once again, involving young Canadians' voices in democracy. We are the future. We are the bearers to many different things, mistakes, improvements, failures, and successes of the current government, and we must be involved in the decisions that get made. We have programs such as provincial councils, ambassadorship placements, where we get young Canadians involved in political offices and opportunity. We have a National Youth Roundtable, which we will be actually bringing to the House of Commons and announcing on May 29th. Year. We've got so many different programs and free membership for young Canadians to be involved. And we're getting ages young 14 to 24 involved in the system, and our goal is to advocate for issues affecting young people and provide the government with youth voice. There is a link shared in the chat if you want to learn more. And on that, you can maybe see that I am truthfully also a young politician. I'm not elected, but I am leader of this organization, and you can see my public school as I'm here. So as authentic as you can possibly have it at school and coming to you to talk about why democracy is so important. Today, we are super honored to have Maya Knight as our moderator for this session, and I'm super excited to introduce you. So without further ado, Maya.
Thanks so much, Jaden, for the introduction and for our panelists for joining us today. Before I introduce our panelists, we are going to have a Jamboard open during this panel. You'll find the link in the chat, and please let us know. If I was a politician, I would. And we're going to be checking back in on this Jamboard at the end of the session today. For now, I'd like to introduce our panelists. All of them have either ran for office or they hold elected positions today. To start, Allison Gu is a Chinese settler born to first-generation immigrants living on the unceded and unsurrendered lands of the Musqueam, Tusalay, and Wet'suwet'en and Squamish First Nations. And she is a second-term Burnaby City Councillor, Environmental Leadership Canada board member, and former PI intern. Maya Provincial is a 25-year-old community organizer and builder, city councillor, and graduate student from rural British Columbia. And she's also pursuing a master's degree in community development, although she's currently on parental leave from school to care for her newborn daughter, Matilda. Scott Ellis is a community-oriented leader in Nova Scotian who has dedicated his efforts to environmental improvement, small business support, and enhancing the mental health system, all with the aim of creating a better place for Blue Nosers. In 2021, Scott ran as a candidate for the Nova Scotia Progressive Conservatives and currently serves as the Clinical and Operations Manager at Eating Disorders Nova Scotia. Finally, Tessica Truong is an award-winning community and climate change policy strategist and advocate. She co-founded City Hive, a nonprofit that's transforming the way that young people are involved in decision-making in their cities, and among other things, has served on Vancouver Mayor's Engaged City Task Force and BC's Minister of Environment and Climate Change Advisory Council. She works at Environment Funders Canada as a program manager. To learn more about our panelists, you can click on their Airmeet profiles, and we'll also reserve some time at the end for a Q&A session where audience can ask questions using the Q&A function. So the first question we're going to be getting into is, what was the pivotal moment or experience that led to your decision to run for office and prioritize environmental issues in your platform? Let's start with you, Allison.
Yeah, thanks, Maya. So I had been involved in organizing around climate activism and working as the environmental commissioner of my university student union. I got involved with organizing the climate strikes. And then the IPCC report came out in November of 2016, or I can't remember, 2018. And I kind of asked myself, why am I trying to convince people to make the right decision when I could just be that person making the right decision? And it was really that timeline of 12 years that made me feel like I had a fire under my butt to get into politics and make as much change as I possibly could.
Awesome. Thanks for that insight. And I'm going to move to you, Tess.
Sorry. Thanks, Maya, and thanks for having me on the panel. Really excited to be here and to see some familiar faces on the call. For me, it was actually, I think, during 2020, and it sounds maybe a bit funny to say this, but I think working in Parliament with the Green Pact parliamentary internship, I just saw how quickly in the span of weeks the government was able to mobilize and put together programs and supports that were available. And after years and years of really hearing that, change is not possible within government, like you have to wait forever to see things happen, I think it was really, really apparent to me that it wasn't a matter that government couldn't create change. It was just a matter of priorities. And so I think very similar to Allison, I was like, I don't think we have 10 or 20 or 30 years to wait in order to act on urgent issues like the climate crisis, like affordable housing, like the opioid crisis. And I didn't want to wait. I think I and as many folks on this panel have great ideas, have great lived experience, have so much to offer, and are a missing voice in politics. And so that's what prompted me to run in the provincial election in 2020.
I think 2020 was a turning point for a lot of people for sure. Maya, I'm going to go over to you now.
Yeah, so I actually decided that I wanted to run for city council all the way back in 2018, even though I didn't ultimately run until close to the end of 2022. So at the time, back in 2018, I was working for an organization called Neighbors United. I think Montana, the ED, participated in a panel earlier today. And I was working as a community organizer on a campaign called 100% Renewable Kootenays. I don't know if she mentioned it in her panel, but essentially this campaign was mobilizing communities in rural British Columbia to create popular support for individual municipalities to commit to 100% renewable energy transition by 2050. And the campaign was like immensely successful. By a few years after the launch of the campaign, they had 13 different communities, the largest region in Canada, to make this commitment to transition to 100% renewable energy by 2050. And working on this campaign, I was doing a lot of mobilizing in communities, but also a lot of lobbying to local government. And I kind of realized two things through that work. First, I became acutely aware of the lack of diversity and representation on the councils that I was interacting with, especially in rural communities. It's like retirees. It's white male retirees, essentially. And so I wanted to change that. And then I also realized how people might laugh at this, but relatively easy it is to affect change on the local level when you're comparing, lobbying work at the provincial level or the federal level. So I was really excited by that opportunity. And then in 2022, I decided to run, and I won, and it's been amazing ever since.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And finally, I'm going to go to Scott.
Thank you very much for the question. It's not something that came to me right away, but I was always interested in politics, and people always ask me, are you going to run? When are you going to run? And the company I was actually working for was an environmental organization, and they said, you need to run. And it was still early on. It was 2021. I was only 22. I thought, one day. But really, it finally came to me after a while. People around me convinced me that said, why not? Why can't I? I think we always have that thought that we don't know enough, that we're not prepared. But something I've realized going to politics is really most people do not know what they're doing. But if you care, that goes a long way. You can find out along the way. So I decided to go into politics, and I wasn't really involved in a party or anything. So that was something I had to find too, which party to run for. And in Little Nova Scotia, the parties are a lot different. It's very localized politics here, and most of the parties are the same when it comes to political leanings. So the party that I thought had the best platform, that I could do the most for, was the Progressive Conservatives in Nova Scotia, and I put my name in and just went with it, and that's the way politics goes. You just have to go with it. And I realized that, you know, I may not know everything, but anyone who walked through that door of my campaign office, or if I was lucky enough to be elected an MLA, I would do everything in my power to help them. I would do everything in my power to make things better for Nova Scotia. And really, that's when it came to me that yes, I can run, because I don't know everything, but I know I can do those two things.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys, for your insights on that question. Moving on, I'm going to be asking, as elected officials today, looking back on your journey, what is something you wish you had known or learned more about prior to running for office? And I'm going to start with you, Maya.
Yeah, I had to think about this question for a long time when I was preparing for this. And the thing that I settled on was that I knew I was going to be playing an activist role at the council table, having run on the progressive platform that I did. But what I didn't know was how much I was going to have to compromise in order to actually get things done. Like when you're an activist, when you're doing activism work, you get to put bold and transformative ideas on the table, and then you get to stick to your guns. Your job is to like not move on that and to advocate for those things until they eventually pass. At the council table, I get to put those ideas on the table, but I'm only one of 7 votes. And so I've learned that a lot of the work is about compromising to get the necessary support that you need for the best possible outcome. So an example that I thought of was I was recently advocating at the city for us to implement or take like a really accelerated approach to implementing a new change to the BC building code that would really reduce the environmental footprint of new builds. And I realized pretty early on that I wasn't going to get the support for like the super strong approach that I wanted us to take. And so I kind of had to walk back a little bit and advocate for still something that was above and beyond what the province was doing, but that I knew I could actually get at least, 4 votes for at the table. And I compromised and I lobbied, and we ended up getting the support 5-2 at the council table. And we're taking a pretty progressive approach to the BC building code in Rossland. And so, yeah, I've been learning a lot about compromise and like setting my ego aside and just settling for the best possible outcome that I can get at the table.
Awesome. And now to you, Allison.
Yeah, I'm actually just going to add something off of what Maya just said. She had said that in local politics, you can make the most impact. I want to encourage every single person here, if you don't already haven't had the chance to talk to city council members and talk about environmental change, one of the great ways to do that is like what Maya was saying, in our buildings and new buildings, especially with municipal jurisdiction, we have the ability to actually make sure that new buildings are significantly more carbon neutral than what they used to be. And especially if you're in BC, there's the zero carbon step code. So make sure that you're talking to your council, because we do read all of our emails. We get sent our emails. We don't have any staff to read them. And so even, I've seen email campaigns of 40 emails come in, and it makes a significant difference in how people vote. But I wanted to, similarly to Maya, I came into council again from the activist world, and I came in with like kind of guns blazing and wanting to push everybody as far as possible. And what I found out was that as I developed relationships and built trust up, I was just able to get things done that what I would have previously thought were so progressive that I would have needed to compromise on. But because I had spent the time building a relationship with my colleagues, they actually just trusted that I had good intentions, and they trusted that I had done my research and that they wanted to support me. And so back when I was first elected in late 2021, early 2022, I tried to get a motion passed around protecting renters who were living in secondary rentals. So that means the vast majority of renters, they rent from an individual landlord. And under those rules in provincial rules, when those buildings get demolished or redeveloped, those renters don't have any rights to return. And while the city of Burnaby has put in a really progressive and really, really supportive tenant assistance policy for redevelopment induced evictions for people who are living in purpose-built rentals, they didn't have those anywhere same provisions for renters who were living in secondary rentals. And when I had proposed it at the time, I was kind of, being really angry and upset and saying, people who are living in this community are going to be, kicked out, and this community is going to be gentrified. And this year, after I had dropped it because I didn't have the support, but I had spent a lot of time just trying to get to know those people as individuals and joke around with them, talk about their hobbies, talk about their interests, and try to be supportive as a human being. And recently, just a month ago, I got that same motion passed. The content didn't change, but my relationship with those people did. And from that, I was able to actually move the dial.
Wow, that's so interesting. It's crazy how like compromises can be made and where they don't need to be made too. Moving on, during your campaign, what aspect of the process surprised you the most, either positively or negatively? And I'm going to start with you, Tess.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I think there are a lot of things that surprised me, especially the first time that I ran. I think really just building on this theme of relationships that both Maya and Allison spoke to. I think something that really surprised me was like the number of folks that showed up and that came out. I think because I had been working as an activist and an organizer for nearly a decade in my city, I had worked and organized with a lot of different campaigns and a lot of different projects. And it was really amazing to see people just come out of the woodworks, folks that I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, but used to organize in high school or used to organize in university with, kind of come back and show up and really step up. And so I think that was something really just building on, like, you never know when the relationships that you've built, whether they're in university or through volunteerism or through the different communities that you're a part of, will really show up. I think on the flip side of it too is like not expecting that anyone necessarily, like even folks that might be close to you or family members, might be able to support in that way. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't support you, but I think it's more a reflection of different folks' capacity at that time and point. And so I think I was both surprised by the folks that did show up, but also surprised by the folks that potentially weren't able to as well, my first time around. But we built a team of over 150 volunteers, which was the largest volunteer team in the entire province in the 2020 campaign. And I was really proud of that because knowing that there's only so much that's within your control as a candidate. So much else is to do with the party, with the leader at the time, what's going on in the news. I really wanted to focus on what I could control within my campaign. And so I set myself some goals that were independent of just winning or losing the election. And one of them was really to involve more folks that had never been involved with elections before, who had never voted before, who might not be eligible to vote because they're PR or on a student visa in the country. And it was really, really amazing to see how we were able to build and to work on and achieve those goals in terms of building and bringing new folks into electoral politics.
Awesome, thank you. And what about you, Scott? Is there anything that surprised you?
Yeah, I think, and it kind of goes towards one of the questions there in the chat is how good and decent most people are. I think sometimes when you're running for office, you see the comments online, you see Twitter, and you say, "Oh my goodness, what am I getting myself into?" You think you're walking into a firestorm. When in reality, most people are quite decent and good people. No matter who opens up the door, sure, there's a few. You always get a few people, but the overwhelming majority, whether they're left, whether they're right, whoever they vote for, are decent people when you open up the door and you can find a way to have a good conversation. I think that's what surprised me the most, because there's a lot of negativity right now around politics, and sure, there are some issues, but I truly believe that, you know, what we are seeing online is not a reality of necessarily the situation on the ground. Most people are still good. Most people are still decent. Most people will still have a conversation. You can find that common ground. So I think that's what surprised me the most going into an election, because you always see that online, especially as a young person, you know, where you grow up online. Like I've seen everything you could possibly see commented. In reality, I got almost none of that on the doorstep. So that's what surprised me the most.
Awesome. And I'm just going to throw out a quick one to the group as well. As youth, we're often focused on ourselves a lot and, youth, the other young people. How crucial do you believe intergenerational support is in advancing environmental agendas within political spheres? And do you employ any strategies to foster collaboration between different age groups in your campaign? Like, are there any seniors involved or any other kind of, um, age groups? And whoever kind of wants to take this one can feel free.
I can go ahead. I definitely think that, I mean, intergenerational support is crucial. I think like the bottom line is that if we want to create like inclusive policies, that people of all ages need to be involved in the creation of those policies. In terms of my campaign, I'm really lucky. I think that I ran in a small town, so leaning on my own like personal and professional networks was like super key for me, and it was enough for me to win the election. I didn't have to do a lot of mobilizing outside of my personal networks. I had everyone from like my grandparents to my friends' kids knocking on doors for me, and distributing flyers and sharing my social media posts. And I think that made a huge difference. Like having an intergenerational team talking to the community was huge. I also think that young people play a really big role in persuading older generations to support climate action, because we have such a huge stake in the issue, and we can communicate that passion and we can communicate our stake. And I think like older people especially will like see us in their children and their grandchildren, and then that creates like emotion around the issue. So I think it's important for all of those reasons.
I'll just add to that. I think one of the ways that I've been able to just be more grounded as a human being, and also develop more authentic relationships in intergenerational relationships, is to operate with the understanding that people have good intentions most of the time. And for example, one of my colleagues, is 80 years old, and sometimes uses language that in our age groups and today's context we would consider not necessarily the best language, but what his heart is trying to say is different than what you might hear if you were to just focus on the words that he's using. And through that relationship building has actually been able to develop in a way that's, I think, quite reciprocal. And because I share a genuine interest and wanting to help him learn and to, help each other understand each other better, he's become a lot more progressive, I think. And he's been able to see, you as a young person, you might be interested in this, and like, will send me a news article. So as much as I think impact is important in terms of trying to mitigate harms wherever possible, I think understanding that what Scott was saying, people are generally good and want to do the right thing and have their heart in the right place, is a really great way to actually do that relationship building.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you guys for those answers, and that's a great segue into our next question. Maya and Allison, I know you've touched on this a bit already, but in your view, what unique advantages do you believe young individuals bring to the table when running for political office, particularly in advocating for social and environmental causes? Scott, I know you're a huge advocate for mental health and youth engagement, so can you start us off?
Yeah, for sure. I think the biggest one is energy. Politics is it's certainly a draining thing to be involved in. It takes a lot of work. It's hard to do things day in and day out, and move inches forward sometimes. Sometimes you're, working on something for weeks and you don't make any progress. So I think young people, it's really good to get involved because you have that energy just to go, 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 which sometimes isn't good because sometimes you go a little bit too hard and end up burning yourself out. But I do think young people can handle these things better, have the energy to really move systems, to really change things and say, I'm going to do this no matter what. So I honestly think that's the number one thing, that energy and fire inside young people. That, not saying others in other generations do not have that still. There's a lot of people that do, but politics is draining. If you're in it for a long time, sometimes you don't have that energy and fire to keep on, knocking on the door to get things moved and passed.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go over to you, Tess.
Yeah, I really love that response, Scott. I feel like I just build on that and saying that I think often there's a sense of optimism and a sense of like not yet being jaded about things that can't be done and things that have gone wrong in the past, but really approaching things from a fresh perspective. I guess whenever we talk about young folks or a certain demographic, I'm always cautious about like painting too broad of a strokes, knowing that, there is no one young people community. There's no one person who can speak on behalf of young folks. Like we're we're not a homogenous community, and so I think there are different advantages and strengths, but I think anytime that there's more diversity in leadership, there's more diversity in decision making, that leads to more thoughtful decisions that are made, and with hopefully less unintended consequences as well. Because I think the problem and the challenge with our current leadership, whether that be in politics or in business or in so many different sectors, is that there's such a lack of diversity of thinking and diversity, whether that be of age, of race, of gender, of class, of sexual orientation, and many other areas of diversity. And so I think the more that we can really build on, I think just, the perspectives of, and one dimension of it is bringing more young folks into politics, so that I think we have different priorities as well, right? In terms of housing, in terms of affordability, we're impacted in different ways that older generations might be, who might already own a home, who might already have children and family, and might be later in their lives and their careers. And I do think that there is, like, if I were to generalize, there is a broader understanding of the pressing issue of climate change and how it's impacting us. It's not just a future threat, but it's a current threat. And I think the justice dimension of it as well. So yeah, that's definitely some of the perspectives I think that young people can bring if elected and when elected into office.
Awesome. And over to you, Maya.
Yeah, I think when it comes to, our strengths in advocating for social and environmental issues specifically, I think that the fact that we have the largest stake in the issue of climate change, just because we have the most time ahead of us on this planet, is actually a huge advantage. It sucks, but it's an advantage when we're running, because it helps us communicate genuine passion and care for the issue. And that really resonates with voters. Like, when you can be passionate and you can be genuine and informed about these issues, people pick up on that when you're talking to them. And I think it can persuade people on the doors. I think, like, on a less deep note, I guess, are just the fact that young people are more tech savvy is also really big, specifically with local elections, where when you're running for office, you don't have this huge team of people running your social media and doing your campaign strategies, when you're the one that's using Canva to make your flyers and running Facebook ads. And those are things that older generations, a lot of them don't understand how to use to the most in the most optimal way. And so, for example, in my campaign, I was the only one that ran Facebook ads. I was the only one that engaged with people on Instagram and TikTok. I was the only one that had catchy flyers, and it was just because of my age and that it's easy for me to do those things. So I think that's a really cool advantage on the local level.
Yeah, and kind of similar to what you're talking about, how do you think your run for office as a young leader has shaped the relevance of youth leadership and key issues in your riding? What's changed after your run? Are there more youth running? And I'm going to start with you, Allison, and then leave it open for the rest of the.
Yeah, I hear from a lot of young people how they're really glad that I'm there. I would say that right now we haven't, well, after I was elected in the 2021 by-election, at that time, the next oldest person was 55, and then everybody else was, 70, 75, 80. And that was the entire council. In the most recent general election, 2022, we've since added a 40-year-old, we've added a 50-year-old, and changed that demographic a bit. But importantly, I think as well, we've actually elected more people who are interested in climate. And by not being the singular voice on that, and they had mentioned, I saw you running, and I thought you were doing a really good job, and I wanted to support what you were doing and help push that forward. And in part, they've said to me, I don't know how true it is, but they've said that in part they were inspired by my run to come on. And because of that, those two voices being added, now we've got a shifting majority who are just more willing to take more radical or scary actions that would have been set by what's called the Overton window, the political reality of what is possible. So as an example, a win that happened just yesterday that I thought was impossible in the last term. The city of Burnaby yesterday voted to join a class action lawsuit with other municipalities to sue big oil companies for their role in climate change, and to try to recover some of the costs that municipalities will have to face because of climate change. So that passed 8-1. And in last year's council, I wasn't sure if we'd even be able to have 4 votes. And that's the thing with a lot of politics and a lot of local politics too, is that once you have, the critical mass of momentum, even if it's not quite the majority, it's people come in groups. So very rarely will you see a vote that passes 5-4. Very often you'll see 7-2 or 1-8, because when people are see that there's another group of people who are really strongly pushing for something, they'll just kind of come along. So that is really important in so don't underestimate your ability as an individual to make change and to bring other people along.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to add anything quickly before we move on?
I can jump into just to say that, that was a secondary goal of the campaign, was to ensure that more folks that were interested in running could kind of be part of my campaign, could shadow me, could see if that was something that they were interested in doing. And so I knew that there were about half a dozen folks that were part of my campaign in the leadership team at volunteering that were interested themselves in running. And I myself was really, really inspired by folks like Mumalaka Kak, who ran and got elected as an MP when she was 25, and an incredible Inuit woman, and many others. And so I feel like just it's I think being part of this movement, being part of this wave, as AOC says in her documentary Knock Down the House, it takes hundreds of us to run for 1 or 2 of us to get in. And I'm so glad that Allison and Maya and so many other young folks are now getting elected and are doing incredible work on councils and in many elected roles across the country. But I think many of us need to try to do this in order for a few of us to get in. And so I think it's just being part of that wave. And so if there are folks that are on this call that are thinking about running themselves, I'd highly encourage you to do it. Of course, do your research, do your due diligence, talk to lots of folks who've run or who've been elected. And I'm happy to, go for coffees, whether they're virtual or in person. And I'm sure many folks on this panel would be happy to support you as well. But I would highly encourage you to do it. It's an incredible experience, regardless of whether you win or lose. You learn so much of it, and we need your voices in politics.
Absolutely. And getting involved in politics is all about collaborating with individuals who hold divergent political values or viewpoints. How do you navigate these interactions and foster constructive dialogue, particularly when faced with disagreements? And Maya, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, I was really excited about this question too because it'll make more sense for those of you who attended the panel that Montana Burgess spoke on with Neighbors United. But so I worked with Neighbors United for like 5 years on and off, and I worked on the Deep Canvassing campaign. And Deep Canvassing is all about persuading people by being curious and sharing in story. And so my entire approach to dialogue in my political life is based off of the work that I've done in Deep Canvassing. So when I'm having a difficult conversation, for example, with a resident, I always take time to ask them questions to try and understand why it is that they think that they're thinking and what experiences led to that. And then I always take the time to share sort of the story behind my own beliefs. And this often results in me being like uncomfortably vulnerable at the council table, which people are really not used to. But it's super effective. Like, so for example, we in Rossland just a month ago, maybe passed some short-term rental regulations that go above and beyond what the provincial government recently implemented. So we basically got rid of all Airbnbs in the community, and that caused a lot of emotions from people who own and operate Airbnbs, especially the ones that are in their own home and are supplementing their mortgage. And so I ended up getting super vulnerable at the council table and sharing with folks that were in the audience, like my experience growing up in this community with a single mom, living in secondary suites my whole life, like as a low-income family, and like almost crying when I was sharing this. And I had staff members at the city, like our CFO, come up to me and be like, I've never seen anyone share like that at the council table, and it's beautiful, and it creates connections. And I think that it really softens these like super polarizing issues. So that's how I approach dialogue in my work.
Awesome. And I'm going to turn it to you, Scott.
Yeah, I think it's something that you have to expect going into politics, that you're going to come across viewpoints that you don't like, you don't agree with, but you need to find a way to get it done, to get things done. The reality is we always, often hear, I see comments online, oh, well, we get rid of the liberals, we'll be fine. We get rid of the right wingers, we'll be fine. The reality is the Earth's been here for a very long time, and no one's ever been on the same page. Everyone's always going to have different views. There's always going to be different sides forever. So I find you have to accept that. And then you also have to accept that you do have to work with others to move things forward. Another thing I hear even from, my side and other sides of the political spectrum is just, okay, we'll get all of our voters out, we'll win the election, we'll do what we want, doesn't matter because the other side's not in. Well, in 4 years, they're probably going to be in because that's how politics works. It flips back and forth. As we can see, and in Canada, you don't have that as much where, one party implements things and the next party eliminates everything the last party did, like you see in the United States. But sometimes it's better to inch forward together than go 4 feet alone and then 4 feet back in 4 years. I think there's a large amount of people that think we can do things alone, that one side can do things alone. It's great when we're all, I've been in politics for a few years now, sitting around a table. It's great when you're at a party table and everyone agrees. But if everyone agrees, probably not everyone is at the table. That's the one thing I've learned about politics, that if everyone agrees, probably not everyone's at the table. So you need to do things together. You need to bring people from the other side, other parties in with you to get things done. You need to understand, it's been kind of said already, but you need to understand where they're coming from. You may not agree with their point, but at least try to learn, why they think the way they do. I think that's really important because especially at the doorsteps as someone who's running, you might come across someone, you might think, wow, their views are, really something. And you may, internally, you may feel really uncomfortable and may want to reject it right away. But don't do that. Try to find out why they think the way they do. Because, like we said, most people are good and decent people. They have a family, they have kids, they're worried about a lot of the issues that you're worried about too. They're just thinking a little bit differently. So try to find out a little bit more about them, learn about their situation, and connect with them as a human and not as, a politician or someone who's, hyper partisan. I find you can get a lot done once you connect with someone on a human level, and then you can move to the politics and policy level. That would be my advice and what I say. You got to find a way, no matter what, to work with the other side. Sometimes I know there's people on the other side when I'm working in politics that probably, want to smack me across the head. And that's good. That's good, because I would rather them thinking that than them not being at the table with me at all. I want them there. I want them to be frustrated and us frustrated at each other, but we're moving forward at the end of the day. We're getting things done together, because I think you can't do things alone. We can't solve the climate crisis on our own. We have to do it together no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way of looking at things and how, differing views aren't always a bad thing. And I'm going to go to you, Tess.
Okay, I think I'm on. Awesome. Yeah, Scott, I really love that example of like, oh, if you're at a table where folks are sharing the same thing and all share the same viewpoints, you're probably not at the right tables. I think similarly, I like to be the dumbest person in the room. Like, I think those are the spaces where you can learn the most, and where you can be challenged the most in your thinking as well. And I think just building on some of your points, Scott, too, like, I think it is so important to invest first in relationships, because change happens at the speed of trust, right? And so you can't really just force change. And I think it's really about building that long-term support and that understanding. And I really loved your example, Allison, with you working with, I'm assuming, an older counselor, and just building that trust, building that relationship over time, learning about their hobbies and their passions, and sharing yours as well. And so that you can connect as people first, as opposed to just putting the work first. I think I think there's a really beautiful part of that's like beyond politics. It's about just I think seeing and really valuing us as humans and relationships before work as well, that I think really is so important. That, like, yeah, I think the work and the challenges that we have ahead of us are so immense and so large, they're going to outlast our lifetimes. But I think the relationships that we build, the friendships, the relationships and the experiences are really what keeps us powered, keeps us from burning out in these movements as well. And so I feel like just that encouragement to really invest in the people around you, and to give back and to build those relationships before rushing to the work first.
I was going to say real quick, perhaps slightly different than what the other speakers have said. I think we do have to take all perspectives into account. I would say the differentiation between that is work with those people who agree on the problem but disagree on what the solutions are, and work towards alignment in what those solutions are. But in this current context, there are people who actually just simply don't believe that the problem exists, or that we are responsible in dealing with the problem. And that is climate change, but it extends to a lot of other issues right now as well. As young people, I think we feel the responsibility often to be the bridge, to be mediators, to be spokespeople. But, in order to keep yourself here and empowered to continue making change, don't spend your energy on people who don't deserve your energy.
Awesome. And just to round out the panel, we're going to do one rapid fire question. In one sentence, what advice would you give to other young people who are considering running for office? And I'm going to start with you, Allison.
What advice? Local politics. Local politics is more impactful than most people realize. I would say that. Build community first. Go do it.
Awesome. Scott, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, do it. I mean, what do you have to lose? If you believe that, you will do everything in your power to make things better, that's all you need. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. Actually, I've met a lot of people, and they're self-admittedly not the smartest person in the room, and those are the people that get the most done. Because they have a fire and passion within them to find ways to move things forward. And that's the most important thing. So you don't need to know everything. Just do it. You got nothing to lose. You've got one life. Go for it.
Over to you, Tess.
Yeah, I think my comments actually connect to Christopher's question as well that he's put in the Q&A. Yes, I think there are definitely unpleasant aspects of holding public office, and I think whether that's in Twitter or in real life, there will be detractors and folks that will have comments or thoughts that might not be positive about you or about your party or about your leader or your work. But I think the advice that I would give is really just to keep in mind why you ran and who you're actually serving, right? Because I think many of those folks might not be the communities and might not be the folks that you're serving. And so really holding true to your own North Star of like, what are your values? What are the issues that you're running on? And what are you hoping to do on those issues? And who are you serving? Having those really, really core and not losing sight of that within all the noise that happens when you're in politics.
Absolutely. And over to you, Maya.
Get involved with organizations or communities that are doing grassroots organizing, especially if it's like a relational type organizing, and learn from them and then apply what you learned to your own campaign.
Perfect. So we're going to go over to the audience Q&A. I believe the questions are going to appear on the screen.
I can see the questions on the screen. I don't know if you can, but I can.
Okay, I actually can't. So
I can hop in on this one. So firstly, I have to set the context that I'm speaking from my personal experience, and it may be just out of luck or context that I haven't personally experienced as much of the harassment threats that I've seen some other elected officials have to deal with. So just setting that context. And I do think some of these harassment threats, they tend to be amplified in specific venues. So Twitter, for example, I am mostly off Twitter now. It has completely destroyed my algorithm. So whenever I post, I get like one like on something. But I don't care because that's just not what I value or where I place importance or priority. Above everything else, I think before you run for office, it's really, really important to know yourself, love yourself, be grounded in your community, your family, your friends, have good support systems and outlets, keep your hobbies, spend leisure time. And it's not easy. Honestly, it's not easy being a young person in politics, partly because of the lifestyle. A lot of your work is in the evenings and on the weekends, where young people, that's when we want to spend times with our friends and family. So having really strong, good boundaries around work-life balance and just whether something is important to you or not, as your priorities, knowing what you're there for, how you want to spend your time, and what is most important to you. for me, it's not attending all of the community events where people announce my name and I shake hands and etc. But it is spending time on researching good policy and spending my 9 to 5 days doing the work that I want to do. Does that mean I might get fewer votes in the next election if I run again? Yeah, probably, maybe. But is that ultimately something that I care about? No. And so being very clear and not being pulled into a lot of what in politics is very superficial, I think is really important. And I just find the internet is the worst space. Most of the time in person, I haven't really dealt with anything. Maybe like there is one individual in their community who is, makes me feel unsafe when I interact with them. But other than that, I felt pretty lucky.
I can jump in really quickly on this. Find somebody, whether it's like a staff member where you hold public office or like another counselor, or MP or MLA, or just somebody else that's in that world that you can talk to. And if using like humor and lightheartedness is helpful to you in dealing with those things, do that. Like I have somebody else on council, and we'll just like, if somebody's being totally whack during a council meeting and we're feeling like the heaviness of that, we'll be like texting each other under the table, making jokes, trying to be there for each other. And it's like, it takes a huge weight off of it. So find your people within that space as well.
If I can just jump in really, really quickly, building on that, Maya, I think it's just really important to find your people or find your community, whether that's inside or outside, and having caucusing spaces for you to debrief it as well. Some advice that Nadine Nagakawa, who's a counselor in New West and who is my campaign manager, shared with me is that it's not that we don't belong in these spaces. It's just that we don't belong in these spaces alone. And so if you can find folks to run with you, if you can find allies that can, watch on council and help debrief with you afterwards, those challenging experiences, it's helpful to not get gaslit and to remain sane.
Awesome. And Scott, do you have any final thoughts?
Just remember that what you may be seeing under a post that you make isn't always reality. There's almost 39 million people in Canada, and if you look on some of these posts, it's the same 5 or 7 people that are saying these comments and coming back each time. You don't even know whether they're real, and likely they're not even in your community. So I wish everyone that had something positive to say would comment, but the reality is there's hundreds, maybe thousands of people seeing what you're doing. There's a couple of the same people all across Canada coming in the comment section. So try to remember that, not to downplay that there is a growing amount of harassment threats towards politicians, but it's not to the level that some may say it is.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your great answers and the audience for their questions. I think that's all the time we have. So I'm going to pass it off to Ami, the Program Director of Parliamentary Internship for the Environment, for the closing remarks.
I think Ami might have signed off, Maya.
Yes, hi, I'm back. Thank you to all of our panelists, Tess, Allison, Scott, Maya, and the other Maya, Jaden, for such an inspiring conversation, for sharing your experience in politics. The Jamboard results are in, and there are some fantastic ideas here. So we'll keep them up even after we wrap up so you can see each other's input. Again, thank you so much for being so open and candid about sharing your experience. A big shout out to all of our day one speakers, our moderators, attendees, our funders and sponsors, ELC staff who are working so hard on the background tech. So Beata, Annika, Raymond, Christina, all a shout out to you who have made Flip Day One a success. For those looking to continue the conversation today, we will leave the networking lounge open and you're welcome to stick around, grow your network, share that LinkedIn profile, maybe even make some friends. When the session ends, you will automatically be left in the networking lounge. So if you're only joining us for day one of Flip, please take a moment to share your feedback with us to help shape future programming like this. You can find the survey in the resource tab and also in the chat. And yeah, please stay engaged with us by following us on social media, signing up for our newsletter, and keeping an eye out for future events, recruitment rounds for municipal and parliamentary internship. We hope to see most of you back again tomorrow. So day 2 kicks off at 10:30 with a fireside chat with Tracy Schmidt, who is Manitoba's Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. And tomorrow's lineup also includes 3 great fireside chat, an interactive workshop, an election cycle boot camp with the Institute for Change Leaders. I'm personally very excited for this. And we'll wrap up with a networking hosted by Apathy is Boring and giving all of you a chance to interact with each other and several guest organizations. So we look forward to seeing all of you there. And again, the panelists are still here. I'm sorry, but thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for all of you for coming out and staying with us for day 1 of Flip. And we will see you all tomorrow, hopefully. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.